Hi, let's speak about Anki for language learning, and if you've never seen any of my videos before, you've never heard of me, my name's Chris, I'm a French coach, so I'll be speaking about Anki from that perspective. Let's start. Well, first of all, there's a trust issue. There's an obvious trust issue, and there's also the question of whether a learner truly appreciates what they're doing when they're learning a language. Being a language learner is an identity. When you are a language learner, it means you have that identity, and it's a state of being that comes with experience. The more you study something, the more you start to see layers of complexity. The more expertise you develop, the more layers of complexity you notice in whatever it is that you're good at. For example, an audience at a rock concert might see the rock band and think that it's just about playing songs. The band that's been touring for 20 years might define their art as musicians very differently. They might say we're not in the business of playing songs. They might say we're rather manipulators of emotion before we're musicians. So they know their skills so well, they know it so deeply, that they've outgrown the traditional definitions. Language learning is quite the same, and I feel that Anki works at the very, very basic level. I need more words, quote unquote. There are different definitions that you can bring to the act of learning a language, and so learning words alone is by far not the definition of language learning. The reality in which we learn a language, all those little variables that belong to real life, for example, our first language, our habits, our motivation, the time we can commit, our threshold for abstract thinking, and even the ideas that we've built about language learning before we even start, are as important as the language itself. There are some very deep circumstances, mental and physical, that come into play even before we start learning a language. And my question is, well, is Anki equipped to cope with this complexity? I found that casual learners typically miss two things. The first is that they don't know the final result, and how could they if they've never experienced it? Essentially, you're learning a thing of which you don't know the final result. That's the first problem. And the second is they can't truly appreciate the process because they've never been there. If you've not learnt German, you can't properly appreciate what the final result looks like, nor how to do it because you've never done it. You've never learnt German, you don't know what speaking German well looks like, and you don't know the way to get there because you've never been there. So the learner doesn't know what they're looking at, even if they see the course, they don't truly know what they're looking at, or even if they hear proper German, they don't really know what they're looking at when they see the language or the learning program. And this is exactly what makes the big brands that we all know flourish. All the big brands that you see on the top pages of Google that we all know and that we needn't name anymore, well, this is what makes them flourish. This non-knowledge from the learner. I don't want to twist the knife, but let us remind ourselves that Duolingo is a thing in this world that was allowed to live and prosper. So if common sense and the public opinion was of any worth when it comes to language learning, frankly, we wouldn't even have a Duolingo. On the contrary, look where it's at today. In Anki, one common criticism is that they flatten the language. One word is as good as any other. It's utterly flattened. Instead of it being a pyramid of hierarchy, it's just one word's as good as any other. So the word squirrel is as good as the word pothole. But this isn't the fault of the learner, not at all. I'm not having a go, I'm not mocking anyone. There are people with bachelor's degrees in language who still can't do it. They can't measure the value of one word against the other. It's a question of interpretation of the language and the value of each word you're learning. As an example, hopefully to prove my point, if I asked you for a commentary on the passive voice in English, you might not know what to say. If I asked you your opinion on the passive voice in English, its importance, its use, you might not know. If I asked you what you thought about the verb got, I might get a similar answer, because a casual learner of languages would struggle to think in these terms about language, because they don't spend their time reflecting on these nuances. You see, they don't have opinions on words. Words are just words, and you can flatten them and put them in a deck of learning cards, and any word is as good as any other. Approaching language in this way with strictly your instinct creates a very shallow understanding of language and a very ineffective study program. Right, well, all this being said, what is Anki? Well, if you're watching this video, you probably know what Anki is. And for those who don't, Anki is an organizer. It's a program which we now call apps, but in my day we used to call it programs. So it's an organizer, it's an app, it's a program you download into your computer for free, and it's a sort of a skeleton. It's a skeleton. You decide what you want to learn with Anki. So it organizes your learning for you, and some people use it for languages. And here are the problems I see. You have to choose between thousands of language programs. How do you know the program's any good? How can you know where it leads to? Do you trust the creator? How do you know that it brings you to the finishing line, or what that finishing line is? Many decks are free, so the creators are not accountable. They have no reputation to uphold, no brand to protect. What are the consequences for the learner of giving up and starting multiple ineffective programs? Point number 6, anyone can teach you part of a language. You know, there's the beginning, there's the middle, and there's the end. Anyone can teach you within the middle part, okay? But very, very few people can take you to the finishing line. It's a very separate skill. And in sports terms, anyone can teach you the basics of hurdles, as we all did in school, but very few can train a champion. It is a different skill, taking you to the finishing line. In language, you don't want to be in a forever learning state. You see, you don't want to be stuck in that middle part forever. You need to find that person who can bring you to the finishing line. Number 7, how do you prevent the popularity factor from misleading you? So the French deck with the most likes becomes the most used. You know, Duolingo exists for a reason. Popularity doesn't always mean quality. Point number 8, how do you know that an Anki deck isn't full of inefficient words? Are you sure that you're prioritizing the right vocabulary? Number 9, what's the end point of any deck? Even if it's described, how do you absolutely know it's useful? And number 10, as I mentioned earlier, are you not flattening language and giving every word equal importance? These are just 10 concerns I have, but I'm sure I can find many more. I spent hours with English-speaking adults learning French with me, who even in close contact with me misheard a certain French sound for a very long time, and it takes repeated corrections to get it right. How does Anki do that for you? And to finish this video, to me there's also an emotional side to Anki. There's an emotional angle to it. It's the way I perceive it. I think that Anki, as any product in the world, has an identity. There's a certain identity to Anki. For example, Berkshire Hathaway emanates quiet confidence. It's the way I perceive that company. Anki, to me, emanates, I'm sorry, but it emanates cheap hacks, last-minute homework, and a certain desperation, if I'm honest. Many users of Anki seem to be in hamster wheel mode. You know, we see this in the way they defend Anki online. I'm sorry to mention it, but the way they defend Anki is, there's an air of desperation to it, like it's the last recourse, you know, the saviour they've been waiting for. And they can't be blamed for it, not at all. I'm not having a go, because there have been too many broken promises in language learning. You know, anyone can just step in, set up shop, I'm a language teacher, hello folks, and teach you anywhere within the middle part of the language, and sometimes even badly. That there are just no standards in language learning. I know that some viewers will say, well, go on then, Chris, you know better. Tell us what we should be doing if it's not Anki, if you think Anki's no good, or if you think you know better. I would answer to that, it's just not my job. I have my course, I have my convictions, I have my take on language learning, I have my program, and I propose the best approach to French I can. From experience, I just do what I do. But I wouldn't touch Anki with a barge pole. I really wouldn't. Knowing what I know about languages, about the psychology of learning, about learners, too much trust is required when using Anki. It's a beautiful idea, open software and all that. Far too risky, in my opinion. Language learning is of course a lot more than just quote-unquote words, which is not really, are we talking about substantives? It's not a linguistic term, you know, everything is a word. What are we even talking about when we say I need more words? So Anki, I feel, functions at a very, very basic level. I need more words, as many people seem to be doing. But language, just like art, is a lot more complex. If my job was about learning words, I wouldn't be doing it. I like language teaching. I like being involved in language teaching precisely because it's complex and it's artistic. If my job was just about words, it would be very sad. So no, don't just memorize quote-unquote words. There's so many interesting variables to language learning. Learning words is not the definition of language learning. And if you want to know more about myself and about what I do, head off to wecommunicate.com. You'll find your first 10 French classes free. Try it, see if you like it, and I hope to meet you very soon. Thanks for watching.